Hey guys, tonight we're going to plunge into the deep blue, not on a luxury cruise liner, but on a creaking, wooden vessel in the ancient world. We often romanticize the seas of ancient Greece, thinking of heroic voyages and mythical beasts, but for the vast majority of men who earned their living on those waters, being a sailor in ancient Greece sucked. And I mean really sucked. We're talking about a life of brutal labor, constant peril, and an almost guaranteed early grave. Frankly, you probably wouldn't last a single storm. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening, drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing on the bustling docks of Piraeus, the sprawling port of Athens. Around 450 BCE, the golden age of Athenian democracy and naval power, the air is thick with the scent of salt, tar, dried fish, and unwashed bodies. Triremes, those sleek, three-banked warships, dominate the harbor, their bronze rams gleaming ominously. Alongside them, stubbier merchant vessels, the whole cawdies or round ships, bob gently, laden with amphorae. You are no longer a spectator. You are a young Greek man, perhaps a farmer's son from a coastal village, or a city dweller with no prospects on land. You've heard the whispers of adventure, perhaps of riches, but more likely, the relentless call of hunger has driven you to the sea. This is the call of the waves, a rough start. What compelled you to embark on such a perilous career for most? It wasn't a choice born of wanderlust or a desire for glory. It was economic necessity. Land was scarce, fertile soil even scarcer. Farming offered a grueling existence with little upward mobility. Crafts demanded years of apprenticeship and often provided meager returns. But the sea. The sea offered a chance, however slim, to earn a living. The burgeoning trade routes, the constant wars between city-states, and the sheer volume of maritime traffic meant there was always demand for strong backs and daring spirits. You might have signed on to a merchant ship, hoping for a share of the profits, or more likely, you were conscripted into the Navy as a rower or deckhand, your civic duty outweighing any personal preference. Imagine your first day. You're assigned to a trireme, the pinnacle of ancient naval technology. It's a lean, mean, fighting machine, designed for speed and ramming power. You're not a hero with a sword, you're a cog in a massive human engine. Your training is swift and brutal. You learn the basic commands, the rhythm of the oars, the feel of the rope in your hands. There's no gentle induction, you're thrown straight into the deep end. You're likely in Trireme, an oarsman on the top bank, exposed to the elements, or perhaps not, a deckhand responsible for rigging and sails. Your fellow sailors are a motley crew. Some are hardened veterans, their faces weathered by sun and salt, their bodies scarred by countless battles and storms. Others are just like you, young, inexperienced, and terrified. You'll find men from all social strata, Athenian citizens, medics, resident foreigners, and even some enslaved individuals, though citizen rowers were prized. Despite the social differences on land, on board, you are united by a common fate, bound by the shared dangers of the sea. There's a crude camaraderie that forms, born of mutual dependence and shared misery. You learn to trust the man next to you, for your life literally depends on his strength and skill. The recruitment process itself could be harsh. For citizens, it was often a mandatory civic duty, particularly during wartime. You'd receive a summons and report to the docks, leaving your family behind with little more than a promise of return. For the less fortunate, it might involve being pressed into service if a ship was short-handed. There was no comfortable selection process, no interviews. If you had a strong back and a willingness to follow orders, your kit would be minimal. A few changes of rough clothing, a leather waterskin, a small pouch for any meager personal belongings, and perhaps a simple cloak for warmth. Comfort was a luxury you simply could not afford, either on the ship or in your thoughts. You quickly learned to live with very little, to value every drop of fresh water, every unbroken piece of hardtack. The farewells were often poignant, fraught with unspoken fears. Your family would know the grim statistics of the sea shipwrecks were common, diseases rampant, and battles deadly. You might offer a last prayer at a small shrine to Poseidon, asking for safe passage, knowing that your fate was truly in the hands of the gods. As the lines are cast off and the ship pulls away from the dock, the figures of your loved ones on shore grow smaller and smaller until they vanish entirely. You're truly on your own now, facing the vast, indifferent expanse of the Aegean. It's a rough start, indeed. You've left the familiar shores behind, embarking on your perilous journey. Now, let's peel back the layers of romanticized notions and confront the daily reality of life aboard cramped and grueling. A Greek warship or merchant vessel was a floating microcosm of hardship, a place where privacy was non-existent. Labor was ceaseless, and comfort was a forgotten luxury. Imagine your living quarters on a trireme. Forget any notions of hammocks or cabins. You, along with perhaps 170, 200 other oarsmen and deckhands, were packed into a vessel designed for speed and maneuverability. Not comfort. You slept wherever you could find space, often directly on the rowing bench if you were an oarsman, or curled up on the deck amidst ropes and cargo if you were a deckhand. The space was incredibly cramped, barely enough room to stretch out your limbs. There was no personal space, no quiet corner to retreat to. You were constantly in close proximity to dozens of other unwashed, sweating men. The air thick with their bodily odors, the scent of stale food, and the ever-present aroma of salt and bilge water. The labor was relentless. If you were an oarsman, your existence revolved around the oar. Hour after hour, you sat chained, figuratively, not literally, as most Greek rowers were free men or citizens, though the discipline was just as rigid, pulling in unison with your comrades. The rhythm was everything, and a single stroke out of sync could disrupt the entire ship's movement. Your muscles would burn, your hands would blister, and your back would ache perpetually. Imagine the repetitive motion, the constant strain, the sweat pouring down your face, soaking your meager clothing. And this wasn't just during battle. Triremes often rowed for long stretches even in calm seas to maintain speed or avoid unfavorable winds. If you were a deckhand on a merchant ship, your toil was equally grueling. You'd be hoisting heavy sails, mending torn ropes, bailing out bilge water, and endlessly adjusting rigging. When in port, you'd be involved in the arduous process of loading and unloading cargo, heaving heavy amphorae of wine or olive oil, or bags of grain. This was backbreaking manual labor, performed under the relentless sun or in the driving rain. Your body constantly pushed to its limits. The diet was monotonous and meager. Fresh food was a luxury only available at port stops. On board, your staple diet consisted of hardtack, a kind of dry, unleavened bread or biscuit that was extremely hard and resistant to spoilage. Dried fish, perhaps some pickled vegetables, and watered-down wine or water. Imagine trying to gnaw on rock-hard biscuits that could break your teeth. Day after day, the lack of fresh fruit and vegetables meant you were constantly susceptible to scurvy, a terrifying disease that would cause bleeding gums, open sores, and eventually death. You'd witness men suffering from this debilitating illness, their teeth falling out, their bodies wasting away, a grim reminder of the nutritional deficiencies inherent in a sailor's life. Water was always a precious commodity. Fresh water supplies were limited, stored in large amphorae, and carefully rationed. Every drop counted. The water would often grow stale, acquiring a foul taste or become contaminated over long voyages, contributing to widespread illness like dysentery. You'd be constantly thirsty, dreaming of clear, cool spring water, a distant memory from your life on land. Hygiene was virtually non-existent. There were no bathing facilities, no fresh changes of clothes, no soap. You lived in your sweat, grime, and the accumulating filth of dozens of men confined in a small space. Disease spread rapidly in such conditions. Lice and fleas were constant companions, their itchy bites adding another layer of discomfort. The stench on board, a mix of unwashed bodies, stale food, and bilge water, would be overpowering, a constant assault on your senses. You'd learn to simply endure it, for there was no escape. Sleep was fleeting and uncomfortable. You'd snatch a few hours wherever you could, often disturbed by the rocking of the ship, the creaking of its timbers, the shouts of the watch, or the sheer discomfort of your hard bed. True rest was a luxury you rarely experienced, leaving you in a perpetual state of exhaustion. Archaeological discoveries of ancient shipwrecks often include remnants of basic provisions and lack any sophisticated living amenities, corroborating literary descriptions of harsh conditions. Even the threat of injury was constant. Ropes could snap, sails could fall, and the ship's movements could send you tumbling. A simple sprain, a broken bone, or a deep cut could become life-threatening without proper medical attention. A ship's physician was a rarity. Most injuries were treated with rudimentary first aid or simply left to heal, or fester, on their own. So, as you envision the glorious Greek fleets, remember the harsh reality endured by the men who powered them. Life aboard was a relentless cycle of back-breaking labor, constant hunger, deplorable hygiene, and perpetual discomfort. Every mile sailed, every victory won, was built upon the relentless, grueling toil of these anonymous sailors, living a cramped and unforgiving existence. It truly makes you appreciate modern air travel, doesn't it? You've experienced the suffocating reality of life aboard. Now, let's consider the invisible forces that truly dictated your fate on the ancient Greek seas, navigating the unseen. Ancient sea lore. In a world without radar, GPS, or even accurate charts, every voyage was a leap of faith, a constant struggle against the unpredictable whims of nature, guided by rudimentary knowledge and fervent prayers. Imagine standing on the deck of your ship, gazing out at the vast expanse of the Aegean. The sun is your primary compass during the day. You'd learn to gauge its position, its arc across the sky, to estimate your direction. At night, the stars became your guides. The North Star, Polaris, was your unwavering beacon in the northern sky. You'd learn to identify constellations, understanding their movements throughout the night and across the seasons. This was your ancient GPS, a celestial map etched into the memories of experienced sailors. You'd memorize the patterns, the way certain stars aligned with distant islands, a skill honed by generations of seafarers, but celestial navigation was only useful on clear nights. What about when the clouds rolled in, or a thick fog descended? Then you were truly lost, relying on dead reckoning, estimating your position based on your last known location, speed, and direction. This was a perilous endeavor, prone to significant error. The fear of simply drifting off course, becoming lost in the vastness of the sea, was a constant, gnawing anxiety. Your most crucial ally and most fearsome adversary was the wind. Ancient Greek ships were primarily sail-powered, and understanding wind patterns was paramount. The Mediterranean has distinct seasonal winds. The Etesian winds of summer, blowing steadily from the north, were a blessing for voyages heading south and east. But turning north against them could be an agonizingly slow process, sometimes taking weeks of tacking back and forth or forcing you to wait in port for a change in direction. You'd learn to read the subtle shifts in the breeze, the ripples on the water, the feel of the air on your skin, all clues to the wind's temperament. Storms were the ultimate terror. The Mediterranean, though often calm, could whip into a terrifying frenzy with shocking speed. A clear sky could turn into a raging tempest in a matter of hours. There were no detailed weather forecasts, no satellite imagery. You'd learn to read the telltale signs a sudden drop in barometric pressure felt as a change in the air, ominous cloud formations, or a shift in the direction of the swell. But often, the storms descended with little warning. Imagine being caught in such a storm. The ship would be tossed like a toy, the waves towering over you, threatening to engulf the vessel. The mast would creak ominously, the sails would strain and tear, and the constant bailing would be a desperate, futile effort against the surging water. You'd be lashed to the mast or railing, soaked to the bone, terrified, offering fervent prayers to Poseidon, the unpredictable god of the sea. Many ships and lives were lost to these sudden, violent tempests, dashed against rocky coastlines or simply swallowed by the furious waves. You'd see men swept overboard, their desperate cries swallowed by the roaring wind and crashing surf. Coastal navigation, hugging the shoreline and using familiar landmarks, was safer but slower. You'd learn the shape of every island, the silhouette of every mountain range, the location of every hidden cove and treacherous reef. This required an intimate, detailed knowledge of the coastline, passed down through generations of sailors. But even coastal waters held dangers: submerged rocks, shifting sandbars, and narrow, current-filled straits. While detailed nautical charts as we know them didn't exist, anecdotal evidence suggests that ancient Greek sailors relied on rudimentary Portolands lists of ports and distances and highly detailed mental maps, passed verbally from captain to crew. The absence of accurate maps and reliable depth soundings added another layer of peril. You relied on local knowledge, on the experience of your captain, and on the occasional soundings taken with a weighted line to avoid running aground in unfamiliar harbors. A hidden reef, an uncharted sandbar. Any of these could rip open the hull of your ship, sending it to the bottom in minutes. Then there were the currents. Powerful, invisible currents could drag your ship off course, pushing you into dangerous waters or slowing your progress to an agonizing crawl. Understanding these currents, predicting their flow, was another vital piece of a sailor's unseen knowledge, a skill that could mean the difference between making port and being swept out to sea. Beyond the physical, there was the deep-seated superstition and religious belief. For ancient Greek sailors, the sea was alive with gods and spirits. Poseidon, of course, was the most feared and revered. You'd offer sacrifices and libations before every voyage, pouring wine into the waves, murmuring prayers for safe passage. Omens were carefully observed: a particular bird flying overhead, the color of the sunrise, the behavior of dolphins. All could be interpreted as signs from the gods, dictating whether to sail or to remain safely in port. A ship carrying bad omens might even be delayed or refused cargo. It wasn't just about skill, it was about appeasing the divine powers that held your fate in their hands. So, as you envision the legendary voyages of ancient Greece, remember the unseen forces that governed every journey. The winds, the currents, the stars, and the ever-present threat of a sudden storm dictated the lives and deaths of sailors. Their survival depended on a fragile combination of keen observation, inherited lore, and a deep, humble respect for nature's overwhelming power. It truly makes you appreciate modern navigation technology, doesn't it? You've felt the ship's motion and the anxieties of ancient navigation. Now, let's go deeper into the heart of a Greek warship, to the truly brutal core of its power beneath the deck. Oarsman's ordeal. If you were a rower in a trireme, your life was an unending cycle of physical torment, deafening noise, and relentless discipline, all for the glory of Athens or whichever city-state you served. Imagine yourself crammed onto a narrow wooden bench, shoulder to shoulder with two other men. You are one of perhaps 170 oarsmen, arranged in 3 banks or levels within the belly of the ship. Your specific position, whether in Thermite's top bank, Zygite's middle, or Thalamite's lowest, closest to the bilge, dictated your view or lack thereof, and the specific demands on your body. The lowest rank, the Thalamites, had the worst conditions, closest to the fetid stench of the bilge water and often in near darkness. You're sitting inches from your neighbor, your knees almost touching the man in front of you. This is your world for weeks, sometimes months. Your existence revolved around the oar. It was a massive, heavy piece of timber, often 14 feet long or more, You gripped it with both hands, bracing your feet against a footrest, and with every stroke, you strained your entire body. The coxswain, perched above, would set the rhythm, often beating time with a mallet or shouting commands. The synchronization was everything hundreds of oars had to move as one, dipping into the water, pulling back, feathering, and recovering, all in perfect unison. One missed stroke, one moment of faltering, could throw off the entire rhythm of the ship, slowing it down or even causing collisions between oars. You were a living, breathing engine, connected to dozens of others by shared effort and collective pain. The physical demands were immense. Your muscles would burn with an intensity you'd never known. Your hands, perpetually wet from sweat and seawater, would quickly blister, then harden into thick calluses, often bleeding and cracking. Your back would ache relentlessly. Your shoulders would scream in protest with every pull. You'd feel the raw chafing of the oar handle against your skin, the constant vibration of the ship, and the spray of water splashing over you. Whether from the sea or from the sweat of the men above, the noise was deafening. The rhythmic splash of hundreds of oars hitting the water, the creak and groan of the ship's timbers under strain, the shouts of the coxswain, the constant panting and grunting of the rowers. It was a cacophony that filled your ears, leaving little room for thought. During battle, this noise would be amplified by the shouts of combatants, the clang of metal, and the terrifying crunch of ships colliding. It's a sensory overload, designed to push you past your limits. Discipline was iron-fisted. While most Greek oarsmen were free citizens, not enslaved galley slaves in chains, the discipline on a trireme was no less brutal. Overseers, often with whips, stood ready to punish any perceived laziness or insubordination. A quick lash across your back was a common reminder to keep your rhythm, to pull harder, to endure the pain. The threat of punishment was a constant motivator, ensuring that you pushed your body past what you thought were its limits. The air quality beneath the deck was appalling. Confined spaces, hundreds of sweating bodies, and the fetid smell of bilge water, water that seeped into the hull and mixed with waste, created a noxious atmosphere. There was little ventilation, especially on the lower banks. The heat could be stifling, particularly in the summer months, leading to rapid dehydration and exhaustion. You'd constantly feel the grit of salt and sweat on your skin, and the pervasive stench would cling to your clothes and hair. Meals were eaten on the bench, quickly, between shifts of rowing. You'd gulp down your meager portion of hardtack and dried fish, barely tasting it, focused only on refueling your exhausted body before the next call to row. Sleep, when it came, was fitful and uncomfortable. Snatched on your bench, amidst the noise and the stench, your body too aching to find true rest. You'd learn to fall asleep almost instantly, to maximize every precious moment of unconsciousness. The psychological toll was immense. The monotonous, repetitive nature of the work, the constant physical pain, the lack of privacy, and the omnipresent threat of death in battle or storm could crush the spirit. You were a part of something larger, a vital component of the ship, but your individuality was largely stripped away. You became a number, a pair of strong arms, a cog in a machine of war. While ancient sources don't offer detailed psychological profiles, the grueling conditions undoubtedly led to widespread fatigue, despair, and a focus on mere survival for the average oarsman. However, there was also a perverse sense of pride and camaraderie. When the ship moved as a single, powerful unit, cutting through the water with incredible speed, there was an undeniable thrill, a sense of collective achievement. You were contributing directly to the power of your city-state, to its naval might. The bond forged between oarsmen, suffering together, relying on each other for survival, was incredibly strong. It was a brutal brotherhood, but a brotherhood nonetheless. You learned the unique rhythm of your benchmates, the way they breathed, the slight shifts in their bodies, becoming a perfectly synchronized unit. So, as you picture the sleek, powerful triremes of ancient Greece, remember the unseen engine beneath the deck. It was a space of intense human suffering, of raw physical endurance, and of lives reduced to the rhythm of the oar. The glory of Athenian naval victories, the speed and maneuverability of their warships that were built upon the agonizing, relentless ordeal of these anonymous oarsmen, straining in the darkness and the stench. It truly makes you appreciate power steering, doesn't it? You've felt the relentless pull of the oar and experienced the brutal conditions below deck. But the ultimate test for any ancient Greek sailor, especially those on a trireme, was war at sea battle's bloody chaos. This wasn't a gentleman's duel. It was a terrifying, visceral clash of wood, bronze, and flesh, where ships became extensions of the battlefield, and survival was a matter of sheer luck and brutal violence. Imagine the tension leading up to a naval engagement. Hours, perhaps even days, of relentless rowing, pushing the ship to its maximum speed, conserving energy for the impending clash. The air grows thick with anticipation, fear, and the acrid smell of nervous sweat. As the enemy fleet comes into view, the orders from the Triarch captain become sharper, more urgent. The trumpet blasts, signaling the final push. Your heart pounds against your ribs, a drumbeat of pure adrenaline. The primary tactic in ancient Greek naval warfare was ramming. The trireme was essentially a giant, weaponized battering ram. Its bronze-clad prow, located just above the waterline, was designed to punch through the hull of an enemy ship. Your job as an oarsman was crucial to maintain perfect synchronization and maximum speed at the moment of impact. Imagine the surge of power as the ship accelerates. Every rower straining, driving the vessel forward like a spear. You brace yourself, hearing the screams of the enemy crew, and then comes the horrifying thud. The impact is bone-jarring, a sickening crunch of splintering wood and groaning timbers. You feel the ship shudder, a violent tremor running through its entire length. After the initial ramming, the battle devolved into bloody chaos. If the ram succeeded, the enemy ship might be incapacitated, taking on water and sinking. But often, ships would get entangled, their oars snapping, their rigging becoming a tangled mess. This was the signal for the Marines, hoplites and archers stationed on the deck, to board the enemy vessel. This wasn't a clean, strategic operation. It was a brutal melee. Imagine the clatter of swords, the thud of bodies, the guttural shouts of men engaged in desperate hand-to-hand combat. As an oarsman, your role wasn't to fight directly, but your life was still in extreme peril. Below deck, you'd be acutely aware of the carnage above. The sounds of battle would echo through the hull, the clang of bronze on bronze, the thud of bodies falling, the agonizing cries of the wounded and dying. Blood, mixed with seawater, might even begin to drip through the deck planks, staining your already cramped space. You might grab a spare oar handle or a loose piece of timber, ready to defend yourself if the enemy broke through. Fires were a constant threat. Flaming arrows or javelins could ignite the highly flammable timber of the ships, turning them into blazing infernos. Imagine the terror of being trapped below deck, the smell of smoke stinging your nostrils, the heat rising, knowing that your only escape was through a deck swarming with combatants, or into the cold, indifferent sea. Many sailors drowned, unable to escape sinking or burning vessels, or weighed down by their own equipment. Beyond direct combat, naval maneuvering was a deadly art. Ships would attempt to dike-plouse, break through the enemy line, turn sharply, and ram from behind. Or they might try a periplus, outflank the enemy, circling to attack their vulnerable sides or stern. These maneuvers required incredible skill and precise timing from the oarsmen. A mistimed turn, a moment of confusion, could lead to your own ship being rammed or becoming entangled and vulnerable. You were constantly aware of the ship's movements, the subtle shifts in momentum, knowing that your life depended on the collective skill of your crew. The stakes were incredibly high. A naval victory could secure a city-state's dominance, control of vital trade routes, and immense prestige. A defeat, however, could mean the loss of an entire fleet, hundreds or thousands of lives, and even the subjugation of your homeland. You were not just fighting for your life. You were fighting for your city. While detailed descriptions of trireme interiors during battle are rare, archaeological findings of scattered weapons and human remains in ancient shipwrecks underscore the chaotic and brutal nature of naval combat. And what about the aftermath? If your ship was victorious, you'd participate in the grim work of salvage, towing crippled enemy ships, recovering bodies, and perhaps stripping the defeated for any valuable possessions. If your ship was defeated and you survived, you faced the grim prospect of capture, enslavement, or a desperate swim to shore, hoping to avoid drowning or being picked off by enemy vessels. There was no concept of prisoner of war camps. Captured sailors were usually enslaved or summarily executed. The psychological toll of naval combat was immense. The sheer noise, the constant threat of instant death, the claustrophobia of being trapped below deck, and the visceral reality of violence left deep scars. You'd witness scenes that would haunt your dreams. Men dismembered by rams, engulfed by flames, or drowning in the blood-stained water. It was a terrifying, sensory overload that forever altered your perception of the sea, turning it from a highway into a battlefield. So, as you hear tales of glorious naval victories in ancient Greece, remember the bloody chaos that raged beneath the surface? The sleek, beautiful triremes were instruments of death, and the men who powered them faced a truly terrifying reality of battle. Their bravery, often born of desperation, fueled the naval might of ancient Greece, a testament to the brutal, visceral reality of war at sea. It makes you feel pretty grateful for modern conflict resolution, doesn't it? You've survived the horror of naval combat, but the sea held more terrors than just enemy ships. For an ancient Greek sailor, every voyage was a gamble against unpredictable forces, pirates, and perils, the ocean's outlaws. The serene blue of the Aegean was often a hunting ground, where human predators and natural disasters conspired to make every journey a desperate fight for survival. Imagine your ship, whether a merchant hulkus laden with valuable cargo or even a trireme on patrol, making its way through a narrow strait or rounding a remote island. The wind is calm, the sun is high. Suddenly, a new sail appears on the horizon, moving with unusual speed and purpose. Your heart sinks. This isn't another merchant. This is a pirate ship. Piracy was rampant in the ancient Mediterranean, a constant, terrifying threat to maritime trade and travel. Cilician pirates, Illyrian raiders, and even renegade Greek sailors preyed on unsuspecting vessels. These weren't romanticized swashbucklers, they were ruthless and brutal. Their goal was simple: plunder your goods, capture your ship, and enslave or kill the crew. You'd hear chilling tales in every port of ships ambushed, crews massacred, and valuable cargo disappearing into the depths or reappearing on distant black markets. The moment of encounter was pure terror. Your ship, especially if it was a slow merchant vessel, had little defense. A few armed guards might be aboard, but they were often outnumbered and outmatched. The pirates would quickly close the distance, their oars churning, their men shouting war cries. You'd see the glint of their weapons, the grim determination on their faces. There was often no mercy. If you resisted, death was swift. If you surrendered, enslavement was your likely fate. Imagine the visceral fear as they boarded your vessel, their eyes sweeping over your cargo, then over you, assessing your value as property. Beyond pirates, the sea itself was a source of endless perils. Shipwreck was a common and devastating end for ancient sailors. The wooden ships, while sturdy for their time, were fragile against the full fury of a Mediterranean storm. As we discussed, there were no accurate charts. Hidden reefs, submerged rocks, and shifting sandbars lay in wait, especially near unfamiliar coastlines. Running aground meant your ship could be torn open, rapidly taking on water. Imagine the chaos, the sickening crunch of wood, the rush of cold water, the desperate scramble for safety as your world rapidly tilts and sinks. Many sailors drowned, unable to swim, or weighed down by their clothing and any meager possessions they clung to. Even if you made it to the surface, you could be miles from shore, adrift in the open sea, at the mercy of currents and exposure. Survival was a matter of immense luck, strong swimming skills, and the hope of being spotted by another passing vessel, a rare occurrence in the vastness of the sea. Archaeological evidence from ancient shipwrecks often reveals cargo scattered across the seabed, but relatively few human remains, suggesting that many sailors either drowned or were carried away by currents, or were indeed taken captive. Shifting winds and currents could also lead to perilous situations, even without a storm. A sudden shift could push your ship onto a lee shore, a coastline towards which the wind is blowing, trapping you against the land with no escape. Or a strong, unexpected current could drag you far off course, into unknown and dangerous waters, depleting your precious water and food supplies. You'd be constantly vigilant, reading the subtle signs of nature's changing mood, knowing that even a gentle breeze could turn treacherous if it pushed you in the wrong direction. Shallow waters and tidal variations, though less pronounced in the Mediterranean than oceans, could also be traps. Entering an unfamiliar harbor without precise knowledge of its depths could lead to your ship running aground, stranding you until the next tide or requiring immense effort to refloat. This vulnerability meant valuable time lost and exposed your ship to further dangers. Then there were the hazards of the cargo itself. If you were on a merchant ship carrying flammable goods like olive oil or wine, the risk of fire was ever present, especially with open flames for cooking or lighting. A broken amphora could create a slippery deck, leading to falls and injuries. Animal cargo, if you were transporting livestock, could panic in a storm, stampeding or breaking loose, causing damage or injury. The ship, a confined space, could quickly turn into a deadly trap. Even beyond physical perils, there was the constant threat of disease and lack of resources. As we've discussed, scurvy, dysentery, and other illnesses could decimate a crew, leaving too few hands to properly manage the ship, making it even more vulnerable to storms or pirate attacks. A long voyage could mean running out of fresh water or food, leading to starvation and desperation, turning crewmates against each other. The life of an ancient Greek sailor was therefore a continuous battle against forces both human and natural. Every time you set sail, you were essentially rolling the dice against these myriad perils. The calm, shimmering surface of the Aegean often masked deadly undercurrents, both literal and figurative. Your survival depended on a volatile mix of skill, vigilance, and sheer dumb luck. And as you finally made it to port, weary but alive, a silent prayer of thanks would surely escape your lips, for you had once again cheated the ocean's outlaws and countless other dangers that lurked in the deep. It truly makes you appreciate modern cruise ships, doesn't it? You faced the pirates and weathered the perils of the open sea. Now, imagine your ship finally limping into a bustling harbor after weeks or months of relentless toil and constant danger. This is port life, fleeting pleasures, lingering dangers. Shore leave offered a temporary respite from the cramped confines of the ship, a chance to find comfort, but also to encounter new threats in the crowded, often lawless confines of ancient port cities. Imagine stepping off the gangplank onto the stone quay of a foreign port, perhaps Rhodes, Alexandria, or even a smaller, less savory outpost in the Cyclades. The ground feels solid beneath your feet after weeks of constant rocking. The air is alive with a cacophony of sounds, the shouts of merchants, the braying of donkeys, the murmur of a dozen different languages and dialects. The smells are overwhelming: fresh fish, exotic spices, human waste, and cheap wine. It's a sensory overload after the monotonous existence at sea. Your first priority, if you're lucky enough to have any pay, is often to find a tavern. These were the social hubs of ancient ports, loud, smoky establishments filled with sailors from every corner of the Mediterranean, local laborers, and shady characters. You'd seek out cheap wine, perhaps some fresh bread and meat, a welcome change from the hardtack and dried fish of the voyage. The camaraderie here is different from on board. It's boisterous, often drunken, filled with boasts and tall tales of storms weathered and enemies vanquished. You'd share a drink with your shipmates, relishing the temporary freedom from the ship's discipline. However, these taverns and port districts were also hotbeds of danger. Prostitution was rampant. And while some encounters might be straightforward, many carried the risk of disease, robbery, or even violent spots. Sailors, flush with a few coins after a long voyage, were easy targets for unscrupulous individuals looking to fleece them. You'd have to be constantly on your guard, wary of pickpockets, con artists, and false friends. A moment of drunken carelessness could lead to all your meager earnings being stolen, leaving you stranded and desperate. Brawls were common occurrences. Tempers, frayed by long voyages and fueled by cheap wine, could ignite over the slightest insult or misunderstanding. A dispute over a game of dice, a perceived slight against your city-state, or a disagreement over a woman could quickly escalate into a violent melee. You'd witness or even participate in tavern brawls, where fists, broken amphorae, and even knives could be used. A serious injury in a foreign port, far from any familiar support, could mean being left behind, unable to earn passage home. Beyond the taverns, the narrow, winding streets of the port city held other perils. Robbery and assault were constant threats, especially after dark or in less reputable areas. Sailors, often carrying their pay, were known targets. You'd learn to stick with your shipmates to avoid dark alleys and to keep a wary eye on strangers. Losing your money meant not being able to buy passage home, or being forced to sign on to another ship out of sheer desperation, perhaps one with a brutal captain or a dangerous route. Then there was the risk of disease. Port cities were melting pots of people, goods, and pathogens. Diseases from distant lands, often carried by ships and their crews, would congregate in these crowded, unsanitary environments. A simple visit to a tavern or a stroll through the market could expose you to new and deadly contagions. Fevers, dysentery, even plague. You might survive the perils of the sea, only to succumb to an illness contracted on shore, far from your home and loved ones. While precise contagion rates are hard to pinpoint from ancient sources, archaeological findings and medical texts consistently highlight port cities as hubs for disease transmission in the ancient world. Despite the dangers, shore leave also offered a chance for replenishment and repair. Your ship would be restocked with fresh water and provisions, and any necessary repairs to the hull, mast, or rigging would be undertaken. For you, it was a moment to stretch your legs, perhaps trade a small trinket you brought from another port, or simply enjoy the feeling of solid ground beneath your feet. You might visit a local temple to offer thanks for safe passage, or consult an oracle, hoping for a favorable prediction for your next voyage. You'd encounter different cultures, hear different languages, and witness customs that were alien to your own. This exposure, while sometimes disorienting, also broadened your worldview, making you a more cosmopolitan individual than most Greeks who never left their polis. You'd pick up a few words of a new language, learn about different gods, and perhaps even sample strange new foods. This was a fleeting pleasure, a temporary window into a larger, more diverse world. But the siren song of the sea would always call again. Eventually, the provisions would be loaded, the repairs completed, and the captain's call would sound. It was time to leave the fleeting pleasures and lingering dangers of port life behind, and once again face the endless, terrifying expanse of the sea. You'd step back onto the ship, perhaps with a few coins in your pocket, but also with renewed aches, a slightly lighter spirit, and the knowledge that the next voyage held its own set of unpredictable perils. It truly makes you appreciate home, doesn't it? You've experienced the fleeting pleasures and lingering dangers of port life. But for the ancient Greek sailor, the greatest threat often came not from a storm or a pirate, but from an unseen, insidious enemy disease and despair, the invisible enemy. The crowded, unsanitary conditions, meager diet, and constant exposure meant that illness and injury often claimed more lives than any battle. Imagine yourself on a long voyage, perhaps sailing to Egypt for grain or to the Black Sea for timber. Days turn into weeks, and weeks into months. The cramped quarters on your ship become a breeding ground for pathogens. You're living cheek by jowl with dozens of other men, sharing limited space, Breathing stale air? If one man falls sick, the illness quickly spreads through the entire crew. Waterborne diseases like dysentery were rampant. Fresh water stored in amphorae would quickly grow stale and could become contaminated with bacteria or parasites. Imagine the agony of severe diarrhea and relentless vomiting, debilitating you, draining your strength, and leaving you desperately dehydrated. In the confines of a ship, with no proper latrines, the disease would spread rapidly, turning the vessel into a floating chamber of misery. You'd see men weakening by the day, their bodies wasting away, their cries of pain muffled by the creaking of the ship. Then there was scurvy. This terrifying disease, caused by a severe lack of vitamin C found in fresh fruits and vegetables, was a common scourge of long voyages. After weeks or months without fresh produce, your gums would begin to bleed and swell. Your teeth would loosen and eventually fall out. Old wounds would reopen, and new ones would refuse to heal. Your skin would become discolored, and you'd feel an overwhelming fatigue, your limbs aching constantly. Imagine trying to haul a heavy rope with bleeding gums, or to row with excruciating pain in your joints. Scurvy was a slow, agonizing death, turning even the strongest sailor into a helpless invalid. You'd watch your shipmates slowly rot from the inside out, a grim premonition of your own potential fate. Beyond these major killers, respiratory infections like pneumonia and various fevers were common, exacerbated by constant exposure to wet and cold conditions, especially during storms or in winter. A common cold could quickly escalate into a life-threatening illness in a body weakened by malnutrition and exhaustion. Injuries, even minor ones, posed immense risks. A scraped hand from a rough rope, a cut from a sharp tool, or a bruise from a fall could easily become infected. Without antiseptics or antibiotics, these infections would fester, often leading to sepsis, gangrene, or chronic debilitating pain. A sailor might lose a limb to infection or simply succumb to a generalized blood poisoning. Far from any help. You'd see men with bandaged, foul-smelling wounds, their faces pale with fever. Knowing that their time was short, medical care on board was virtually non-existent. There were no dedicated physicians for common sailors. You might rely on a shipmate with some rudimentary knowledge of herbs, or simply endure the pain and hope your body could fight off the illness. Serious injuries often meant being left behind at the next port, or simply dying on board. Your body slipped over the side into the deep. While some ancient medical texts mention sea-related ailments, detailed accounts of onboard medical practices for common sailors are rare, suggesting very basic, if any, formal care. The psychological toll of constantly battling disease and witnessing the death of your comrades was immense. The pervasive fear of falling ill, the despair of knowing there was little hope for recovery, and the constant exposure to suffering would grind down even the strongest spirit. You'd live in a state of perpetual anxiety, hyper-aware of every cough, every ache, every sign of weakness in yourself or those around you. This despair was an invisible enemy, eroding morale and turning men inward, focused solely on their own desperate survival. The high mortality rates due to disease meant that crews were constantly being replenished, often by inexperienced hands, further increasing the dangers of long voyages. The cycle of illness, death, and replacement was a grim reality of ancient seafaring. So, as you conjure images of ancient Greek sailors, remember the invisible enemies that lurked beneath the waves and within the very confines of their ships. Disease and despair were relentless adversaries, silently claiming more lives than any enemy fleet or raging storm. Their suffering was often quiet, agonizing, and largely unrecorded, a testament to the brutal realities of life at sea, where even the hardiest sailor was vulnerable to the unseen forces of nature and biology. It truly makes you appreciate modern medicine, doesn't it? You've battled the invisible enemies of disease and despair, enduring the physical and psychological toll of life at sea. But amidst the pervasive hardships, there was a unique and often unexpected reward for the ancient Greek sailor beyond the horizon. Exotic encounters. Every distant port, every new coastline, offered a fleeting glimpse into worlds vastly different from your own, broadening your worldview and providing experiences few landlocked Greeks could ever imagine. Imagine your ship pulling into a bustling port in Egypt, perhaps Naucratis, the designated Greek trading post in the Nile Delta. The smells hit you first: rich spices, unfamiliar perfumes, and the earthy scent of the Nile itself. The sights are mesmerizing: towering temples adorned with strange gods and hieroglyphs, colossal statues staring out across the landscape, and vibrant markets teeming with people dressed in linen garments, speaking a language that sounds utterly alien to your ears. You'd marvel at the sheer antiquity of the civilization, sensing a history that dwarfed even that of your own beloved Greece. You might trade a few drachmas for exotic goods, fine papyrus, rare pigments, or delicate alabaster, returning to your ship with a sense of wonder at the vastness of the world. Or perhaps your voyage takes you to the distant shores of the Black Sea, to a Greek colony like Olbia or Panticapaeum. Here, the landscape is harsher, the air colder, but the markets are rich with timber, grain, and furs from the vast Scythian hinterlands. You'd encounter the Scythians themselves, fierce, horse-riding nomads, dressed in leather and animal skins, with a reputation for both skilled craftsmanship and brutal warfare. Their customs would seem wild and untamed compared to the refined ways of Athens. You might witness their unique burial rites or their reverence for their horses, a stark contrast to the agricultural life you once knew. It's a glimpse into a world of untamed wilderness and raw power, far from the philosophical debates of the Agora. Your journey might lead you west to Magna Graecia, modern-day southern Italy and Sicily, to cities like Syracuse or Taurus. These were Greek colonies, yes, but they had developed their own distinct cultures, blending Greek traditions with local influences. You'd find familiar temples and gymnasiums, but also notice subtle differences in dialect, in architecture, and in the temperament of the people. You might encounter Etruscans, with their enigmatic language and unique artistic styles, or the burgeoning power of Rome, still a republican city, but already radiating an undeniable aura of ambition. It's a chance to see different interpretations of Greekness, and to witness cultures that were both familiar and unsettlingly new, even closer to home. Voyages to the islands of the Cyclades or the coast of Asia Minor would expose you to diverse Greek dialects and traditions, as well as the remnants of older civilizations like the Minoans or Mycenaeans. You'd encounter Phoenician traders, with their dark-skinned faces and their reputation for shrewd dealing, offering exotic goods from the Near East, rare dyes, intricate metalwork, and precious timber like cedar. You'd learn a few words of their languages, pick up on their bargaining techniques, and perhaps even exchange stories of the sea. While direct formal diplomacy between sailors and foreign rulers was rare, the informal cultural exchange through daily interactions in port was constant and profound, leading to a diffusion of ideas and technologies that historians increasingly recognize. These encounters were not always peaceful or pleasant. You might face suspicion, hostility, or even outright violence in certain foreign ports. But for all the dangers at Aeus, there was an undeniable allure. You became a living bridge between worlds, carrying not just cargo, but also stories, observations, and new perspectives. You tasted unfamiliar foods, heard strange music, and witnessed religious ceremonies that both fascinated and sometimes repelled you. This constant exposure to different cultures broadened your mind in a way that staying in your polis never could. You became more worldly, more adaptable, capable of navigating diverse social customs. You learned that your own Greek way of life, while cherished, was just one among many, each with its own merits and quirks. This practical, lived experience of cultural diversity made you a unique figure in ancient Greek society, a true cosmopolite. You'd return to Athens with a twinkle in your eye and 1,000 tales to tell, though perhaps only to your closest confidants. Your mind a rich tapestry of experiences from beyond the familiar horizon. It was a trade-off immense hardship for unparalleled exposure, a life of constant peril for a unique and unforgettable education in the vastness of the ancient world. You've explored the distant shores, tasted exotic foods, and battled the hidden enemies of the deep. As our journey through the life of an ancient Greek sailor concludes, let's reflect on a life adrift, the legacy of the seafarer. These unsung heroes, often forgotten in the grand narratives of philosophers and generals, were the true arteries of the ancient world, connecting distant lands and shaping the very fabric of Greek civilization. Imagine yourself, now an old man, perhaps retired from the sea, sitting by the docks of Piraeus, watching the ships come and go. Your body is marked by a lifetime of hardship, gnarled hands, weathered skin, perhaps a limp from an old injury, but your eyes hold the wisdom of countless voyages, reflecting a world far vaster and more complex than most land dwellers could ever imagine. Your most tangible legacy is the economic interconnectedness you helped forge. The vast trade network that linked the Greek city-states with Egypt, the Black Sea, Magna Graecia, and the Near East was built upon the backs of sailors like you. You transported the grain that fed the burgeoning populations, the timber that built their homes and ships, the metals that forged their tools and weapons, and the luxury goods that enriched their elites. Without your tireless efforts, the Greek world would have been fragmented, starved of resources, and much less prosperous. You were the practical engine of ancient globalization, ensuring the flow of goods that fueled entire civilizations. Beyond mere commodities, you were a crucial conduit for cultural diffusion and the exchange of ideas. Every time you docked in a foreign port, you absorbed new customs, heard new languages, and witnessed different ways of life. You brought back not just pottery or wine, but also stories, knowledge, and subtle influences that gradually permeated Greek society. Philosophical concepts, artistic styles, religious practices, and even technological innovations like ship design improvements or navigational techniques often traveled aboard merchant vessels, carried by curious sailors who had seen them firsthand. You were a living bridge between diverse cultures, fostering a shared Mediterranean identity even amidst constant conflict. The very power and prestige of city-states like Athens were inextricably linked to their naval might. Powered by the thousands of oarsmen and sailors who risked their lives in battle and on patrol. The glory of victories like Salamis, which secured Athenian dominance, was built upon your grueling labor and bravery. You were the backbone of their military and economic strength, protecting trade routes and projecting power across the Aegean. Your life, though harsh, also contributed to the advancement of practical knowledge. The collective experience of generations of sailors like you led to a deeper understanding of winds, currents, celestial navigation, and shipbuilding. This practical, empirical knowledge, born of direct observation and trial and error, was vital for future maritime exploration and trade, quietly pushing the boundaries of ancient understanding of the natural world. While philosophers debated abstract concepts, sailors like you were performing daily, dangerous experiments in applied physics and meteorology, though their findings were rarely codified in formal texts. And what of the human cost? The legacy of the ancient Greek sailor is also one of immense suffering. The shipwrecks, the pirate attacks, the rampant diseases, the brutal labor, and the anonymity of death at sea. These were the constant companions of your profession. Thousands upon thousands of lives were sacrificed to the unforgiving waves, often leaving behind families who never knew their fate. The memory of your comrades lost to the sea would forever haunt your thoughts. A somber reminder of the perils you miraculously survived. Yet, despite all this, there was an undeniable allure. The freedom of the open sea, the thrill of discovery, the unique camaraderie forged in shared hardship, and the quiet pride of connecting distant worlds. You were a wanderer, a survivor, a bridge builder, who lived a life of constant motion and profound experience. Your journey was not for the faint of heart, but for those who dared to embrace the unpredictable, the dangerous, and the exhilarating vastness of the ancient Mediterranean. So, as you hear the gentle lapping of waves in your mind, Remember the legacy of the ancient Greek sailor. Their lives, adrift between sky and sea, were fundamental to the rise of one of history's most influential civilizations. They were the unsung heroes who truly connected the dots on the ancient map, leaving behind a legacy not just of routes traveled, but of a world irrevocably linked by their courage and their toil. All right, as the last echoes of our journey with the ancient Greek sailors fade into the quiet of the night, it's time to gently bring our minds back to the present. You've felt the spray of the waves, heard the rhythmic pull of the oars, and faced the perils of ancient seas. It's a powerful reminder that history, in its quietest corners, often reveals the most poignant truths about human resilience and the endless call of adventure. Let the images of rickety wooden ships, raging storms, and bustling harbors fade away, giving way to the quiet peace that surrounds you. The smell of salt and tar fades away, giving way to the familiar comfort of your own space. Let any lingering thoughts of pirates and disease drift away, replaced by a sense of relaxation and peaceful reflection. The struggles and resilience of the ancient sailors now, temporarily, become part of your understanding, enriching your sense of history and the spirit of human exploration. As your breathing deepens and your body relaxes, know that the stories of the past are always here, waiting patiently to be rediscovered whenever you seek a gentle escape into the depths of time. But for now, the journey is complete. Rest easy, knowing that another story has been revealed. Gently, just for you.